Hey, hi all, welcome back to the channel again. Today we are going to discuss about class and style binding. Those are a type of one-way data binding, and this is an extension of our last video. There we have learned about one-way data binding, and there are some types of it like interpolation, event binding, property binding, attribute binding, right? So the class binding and style binding we are looking into this video, and with that we will be looking into two-way data binding in this video. And there are two ways we can achieve two-way data binding. The first one is using ngModel, and the second one is custom event and property binding. So we will look all of these in this video. Please watch till the end. Let's understand the class binding first, how we can achieve that. So there are multiple bindings. We have multiple type of class binding. Let's understand that. So the first type is nothing but the single class binding. So we have this dot test class over here, so let's add that class. As we all know, the attribute bind, we will bind like this. So to bind a single class, we need to give the class name with the dot, right? So class dot test, and we need to bind this class name with some value in the TS file. So let's say show test class is equal to true. Let's bind this boolean value to this binding over here. So if we do this, it will apply that class. So let's reload this page. So now you can see the the color has been changed over here for this paragraph. That means the test class has been added to this, as you can see over here. So if you want to make this class to not appear, you can do one thing. You can just make this flag as false, and the class will not appear over here. As you can see, the color has changed or reverted back to its original color, that was green, right? So this is how you can turn on and off a single class. Okay, so this is nothing but a single class binding. Now let's look at the multi-class binding. So there are several ways. There are actually three ways of binding a multiple classes. Let's understand those one by one. So for that, I'll just create a variable of type CSS classes is equals to, I'll just assign an empty string for that, and let's assign this variable over here and remove the single class binding. We don't want that. So in this case, we don't want single class binding. We just need to bind whatever attribute it has. So right now we are binding this class attribute and assigning the value of CSS classes variable. So now the first way is nothing but a string expression. So let's add a classes test, test1, test2, and test3, right? So if I save this and head over to the browser, you can see the test class has been added. Let's refresh this, clear the cache. Now you can see there are multiple classes added: test, test1, test2, and test3, right? So these are all those classes are. Now what we are doing, we are actually using the string expression to assign multiple classes to the HTML element. Now there is another way we can do. We can achieve the same thing. Let's copy and paste it over here. We can use the string array to assign the values. So let's wrap these classes into string. We are actually creating a string array over here. So now if I do the same thing, if I save this, save everything and refresh the browser, you can see the same classes has been added over here. So if I remove the last class from the array, you can see that class will not appear on the UI. There are classes till test2 only, right? The test3 class is not appearing over here as we have removed it from the array. So this is the one thing, and the last thing we can use, we can make use of record. So let's use it. The first value is nothing but the string value, and the second is boolean. So over here we are creating a record of key and value. The type of key is nothing but string, and the type of value is nothing but boolean. So let's add these classes over here. Test true, then we have a test1 false, let's say. If you do not wish to add that class, just make its value as false. Then we have a test3, let's make it as true. So if I save this and if I head over towards the browser, you can see test2 and test3 classes has been added. If you want to add test1 class, you can make it true, and now you can see the length of classes is 4. That is nothing but test1, test2 and test3, right? So this is how you can turn on or off a particular list of classes, but then you need to make the type of that variable nothing but record of type string and boolean. Okay, so this is the main thing you need. Now as you have learned the CSS class binding, there are multiple ways. Let's learn about the style binding as well, right? So now what we can do, instead of class attribute binding, we will just bind the style attribute. And now what I want is, I want to bind a single style property that is nothing but style.width. Let's say we have a variable called para width, and its value is nothing but 100 pixel, let's say, and we'll just assign this variable to this. And now if you look at the screen, you will understand the width has been changed. Now it is 100 pixel, right? Now there is another way. With this approach, you can do one thing. You can specify the units, let's say px, and in case of px, so as you can see, this is nothing but accepting the number, so we need to add or maybe assign the number variable to it. Okay, because the px will get added dynamically. So as you can see, no changes, width is nothing but 100 pixel only. Okay, so this is how you can bind a single property with specifying units or without specifying unit. If you specify unit, you need to assign a number variable. If you do not specify unit, then you need to assign this string variable which contains the px or any other unit like rem, right? So it depends on you, so how you want to use, or what kind of unit you need to give. Now the other thing is, there are two more ways we have. Let's say para styles, and we can do one thing. We can assign this string expression to this style binding directly. Let's add height and width over here. Height 100, maybe 60 pixels, let's say, and width is nothing but 250 pixels, right? If I save this, save the HTML, you can see the height and width will be actually getting added over here. So height is 60, width is 250. Okay, so this is how you can assign the string expression also to bind the styles. The another way is using record. Now we can create a record over here, record type object. So let's say record. Now here I want key and value to be string only, because we are not we are actually not turning on or off any property over here. As we can see, we have turning a particular class on or off. Because we are turning a class on or off, that's the reason the type of value is nothing but boolean, but here we are having a key as a string and its value also as a string. So that's the reason we need to create an object of type record, and the type of key and value should be string only in this case. Okay, so let's add these two properties as it is over here. So let's convert them into strings, and then over here as well let's convert them into string, and instead of semicolon we want a comma over here, right? So let's save everything and head over to the browser. You can see the same styles has been applied. Now we are using record type object actually. Okay, so these are actually four ways you can style or you can bind styles. Okay, if you want to learn more ways of applying styles, you can look into the playlist of Angular and you can see the component styling video. So on that video I have actually taught everything about component styling, how we can, there are multiple ways of giving styles. And in this video we are learning about the binding styles. Okay, so these are the four ways. So let me create one more variable over here of para width. So here we want to give pixels. Now in case we do not specify the unit in the bindings. Okay, so in case we do not specify units in the binding, you need to assign string with the unit. As you can see right now we have pixels as a unit. And now the second case, if you specify pixels or any other unit, you don't need to specify that in the TS file. So now this is the case when we do specify the unit in the bindings. Okay, and in this case we want to use the number. So this is how it is. Now let's understand the two-way data binding. To understand two-way data binding, let's take a input over here. Name will be text, its type will be text, right? Now let's create a variable over here which will hold the initial value of it. Let's say input value is equal to empty string. Let's render this input value over here using string interpolation. So this is also a type of one-way data binding. Okay, now what we'll do, we'll use banana in the box syntax over here and ngModel, and we'll assign the value input value to it. Okay, so what it will do, it will actually keep track on two things. The first one is event binding and the second thing is property binding. So it will bind the value property first, and then it will bind the value property first with this value, and then it will bind the input event, and whenever we change something, so it will bind the whatever value of this particular input to the value property of this input, and it will store that in the input value. Okay, so first it will store that into the input value, and then the same input value will get binded to the value property of the input box. So this is how it is. So if I refresh this, okay, why it is not coming? I refresh this again. Okay, let's try rebuilding the app. Right, so it is there. So let's add LearnLift-Eng over here. So as you can see, it is nothing but a two-way data binding. So the value and the input event both are getting binded at the same time, but they will work simultaneously. Whenever we press any key, the input event will get fired, it will store that value into the variable that we have binded, and then the same variable value will get binded to the value attribute or value property of that particular input box. So this is how it will work. Okay, the other way is, what we can do, we can make use of input and output properties. So this is the one way using ngModel, and let's understand. But before that, if you want to use ngModel, you need to import the forms module. Okay, you need to import the forms module, then only the ngModel will works. Now let's understand the um, the two-way data binding using custom binding and custom events and binding properties. Okay, so let's bind one property and use a custom event. So for that, let's add a new component that is nothing but a child component. So let's generate child component. Okay, so we are generating the child component. Now inside child component, what we want is, we'll just use the ng container over here, and over here we'll do one thing. We will use the same banana in the box, and we'll just whatever value we are getting, we'll just bind it with the user. Okay, user, or maybe okay, let's not bind that value. Let's bind the value property of it, and we'll just use one variable over here, and then use the input event binding, and we will give one method on it. Let's say on value change method, and it will accept $event as a parameter, right? So let's add the on value change method over here, e of type any. Now what we'll do, we'll create one variable that is nothing but of type input. Let's say input value, and the initial value is nothing but an empty. Let's add the input for the input, then we'll need to use the @output. So for output, we will use the event that is nothing but input value change event, right? So input value change event will be a type of EventEmmiter. Okay, and the value, the type of value is nothing but a string. Let's say new EventEmmiter of type string. Okay, so this is how you need to create the type of EventEmmiter. So let's add this output into the imports array. Okay, so we have added it. Let's use the parenthesis over here. So as you can see, we have two properties. Now the first one is input property. This is nothing but input val. The same thing we need to give over here as a value binding. Okay, right now inside a on value change, what we need to do, we need to emit it, right? So how we can emit it? First of all, we need to take the input, whether the value is coming from the input or not. So let's say event dot target as HTML input element, right? E dot target. Okay, so now if it is an empty, if it is an type of input, then only just emit the value this dot value change, input value change. Let's say input value change dot emit input dot value, right? So this is how we are actually emitting whatever input value we are getting. So let's see why it is giving an issue to us. Okay, we are using ng container over here. Instead of ng container, let's use input. Right, so this is how. So what we are doing over here, we have binded, so this is the child component. We have taken an input over here, right? And then we are binding the property of it, and then we are binding the event of it, right? So once something has changed, we are sending the value back to the parent, and the initial value we are taking from the parent itself. Okay, so now what we'll do, we'll use this component inside app.ts file. So let's add that child component, right? Now use this child component selector inside the app.html. So let's say we are, I'll just comment it out over here, app child component. Now we need to assign the value. So value we have as a input value over here for us. So the initial value we are passing it, because child component is expecting some value from parent. So what it is nothing but a input value. So the same input value variable we are passing over here to this. But now here again we need to bind it using banana in the box syntax, right? So let's say input value is equal to input value. So this is all we need to do. With these changes, let's head over towards the browser. So now as you can see, LearnLift, okay, right, so we are not showing it, so let's show it over here. LearnLift-Eng, right? So this is how we have used a child component to be rendered into the parent with the input box, and the input box has both the bindings, the value binding and the input event binding, right? So these both bindings the child component has, as you can see over here, the value binding and the input binding. And the initial value it is taking from the parent, as you can see over here, as an input value variable. And then whenever we change something in the text box, it is emitting that value to us, and the value we are catching it over here inside the input value, right? So again, once we catch this value, we are setting that value back to the input type of variable of child component, right? So let me show you in a simpler way how we are doing this, right? So we have input value change event binded, right? So emitted, as you can see over here, so this is the input value change event emitter, right? So for this event emitter we need to bind some event. So let's bind the event. Let's go to the child component dot app component dot ts. So let's say get value from child like this, val of type any, and let's assign this value to the input value. So this dot input value is equal to val, and then we'll use this same over here dollar event. Okay, and then instead of this, let's use the binding over here. So the binding is nothing but an input value binding, right? So this is the uh, actually child component input property we have as an input property, and for this we need to again assign the input value what we have in the app.ts file. So this is nothing but the same thing we are doing over here. So as you can see, learn lift eng, right? But now both things we are combining into one, as you can see over here, like this. Okay, so we are binding whatever information we are getting from the child component to this input value variable. At the same time, whenever user change something into the input box of child component. Okay, so this is how it is. If you are new to input and output, I would recommend you to watch my input and output video and the view child video. You will learn all basic things like how we communicate in between the components, right? So this is the second way of two-way data binding, how we can bind the data two-way in the child and parent component. Okay, so this is the one way, and the first way is nothing but this using ngModel. So I hope you like this video. If you like it, so hit like on the video, share it with your friends, and do not forget to subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon. Thanks all guys. Let's meet in next video.